What happens when Hollywood's most beloved sweetheart steps onto daytime television, only to find herself face to face with its most controversial voice, and the conversation spirals so far out of control that it ends in a shocking walk-off no one saw coming? What you're about to hear is one of the most explosive and uncomfortable moments in live television history. Asterisk before we begin. Make sure you subscribe and leave a comment. Because this story doesn't just unfold, detains. Asterisk the morning began like any other at the View Studios in New York. Sandra Bullock arrived early, prepared for what was meant to be a warm, light-hearted promotional interview for her latest film. In the green room, she sipped her coffee, calmly reviewing talking points with her publicist, completely unaware that within minutes, she would become part of television history. Asterisk, as the cameras rolled, Whoopi Goldberg welcomed her with a smile. She praised Sandra's new film and invited her to talk about it. Sandra responded effortlessly, her signature warmth filling the studio. She spoke about the project with genuine passion, describing a story centered on second chances, on the idea that no matter how hard life hits, reinvention is always possible. Asterisk the panel leaned in. The audience was captivated. Asterisk Sarah N. followed up, asking what drew Sandra to this particular story. Sandra answered thoughtfully, explaining that everyone reaches moments where they feel broken or lost, and that the character reminded her it's never too late to choose kindness over bitterness, or to build bridges instead of burning them. Asterisk, the conversation flowed naturally, until it didn't. Asterisk, Joy Behar had been unusually silent. Her expression hardened as she listened, eyes narrowing as if Sandra's words struck a nerve. Then, abruptly, Joy interjected. Her tone shifted the energy in the room instantly. Asterisk, she referenced Sandra's past comments about the entertainment industry, suggesting they were naive, overly idealistic. The warmth in the studio evaporated. Asterisk Sandra paused, momentarily caught off guard, but remained composed. She calmly asked Joy to clarify what she meant. Joy leaned forward, dismissing the idea that people truly change, questioning whether some individuals are simply selfish by nature and willing to grow, unwilling to take responsibility. The studio fell silent. Whoopi shifted uncomfortably. The audience sensed it too. This was no longer about a movie. This was something personal. Asterisk carefully choosing her words, Sandra replied that she believed deeply in growth, that when people are given the opportunity to reflect and learn, most choose to become better versions of themselves. Asterisk, Joy scoffed. Most, she repeated sharply, insisting that some people never change, that they hide behind success, paint themselves as victims, and leave damage in their wake. Asterisk, now. Every set of eyes was on Joy. Asterisk, this wasn't typically even for a show known for confrontation. Something raw was driving the exchange, and Sandra was clearly trying to understand what she had walked into. Asterisk Whoopi attempted to redirect the conversation back to Sandra's upcoming projects, but Joy wasn't finished. She challenged the idea of redemption, demanding to know where accountability fits in. What happens to those hurt while someone else is finding themselves? Asterisk offstage. Sandra's publicist gestured frantically, but Sandra didn't flinch. Asterisk, she responded firmly, stating that she absolutely believes in accountability, but also believes that holding on to anger ultimately harms the person carrying it. Forgiveness, she explained, doesn't excuse bad behavior. It simply refuses to let it control one's own humanity. Asterisk's Joy fired back, her voice rising. She accused Sandra of speaking from a place of privilege, of having the luxury to preach forgiveness from the comfort of a perfect career and an untouched life. The tension was now unbearable. Cameras hesitated. Crew members exchanged uneasy glances. The audience sat frozen, watching what felt less like an interview and more like a deeply personal confrontation unraveling live on air. Asterisk. And this was only the beginning. Sandra finally leaned forward, her voice calm, but now edged with unmistakable steel. She addressed Joy directly, making it clear she was no longer willing to be spoken over or spoken down to. She said she didn't understand what this was really about, but if Joy had something specific to say, it should be handled privately, not weaponized on live television, against someone who had come in good faith. Joy echoed the phrase with open mockery. Good faith. She scoffed. Then, without hesitation, she launched into a tirade about betrayal in the industry, about smiling faces that hide knives, about careers built by stepping on others, while preaching kindness and redemption from the safety of success. The other hosts exchanged uneasy glances. This was no longer an interviewed disagreement. Joy wasn't debating ideas, she was unloading years of frustration, and Sandra had become the target. Sandra took a slow breath, clearly fighting to maintain her professionalism. She reminded Joy that she had come to talk about her film and to connect with the audience, not to serve as a stand-in for unresolved personal grievances. Whatever Joy was dealing with, Sandra said firmly, this was not the place to work it out. That word, personal, set Joy off. Her voice cracked with indignation as she demanded to know if Sandra really wanted to talk about personal issues. She pivoted sharply, accusing Sandra of using humanitarian work as a publicity tool, of turning charity into photo opportunities while others, she claimed, were doing the real work behind the scenes. The accusation hung in the air like poison. One host stared in disbelief. Another sat frozen, watching Joy as if seeing her for the first time. Sandra's composure finally began to fracture. She responded sharply, calling the accusation completely out of line. Her charitable work, she said, was something she took seriously, and she would not tolerate her integrity being questioned without evidence. Joy laughed a harsh, dismissive sound. She reminded Sandra how long she'd been in the business, claiming she knew exactly how people like her operated. According to Joy, few gala appearances and a well-timed donation were all it took to manufacture a saintly image. Sandra's voice turned cold. She asked Joy, slowly and deliberately, what exactly she meant by that. Joy didn't hesitate. She snapped that she was talking about people who believed they were better than everyone else, people who floated above the mess while others fought in the trenches. She mocked Sandra's talk of forgiveness and second chances, demanding to know where that forgiveness had been when others needed it from her. The studio fell into total silence. Only the low hum of cameras and the distant city noise could be heard as everyone watched the confrontation spiral out of control. Production assistants scrambled for guidance, but no one seemed to know how to stop what was unfolding live on air. Sandra spoke again, her words slow and measured. She said she genuinely had no idea what Joy was talking about, then that Joy needed to either explain herself clearly or apologize for making such baseless accusations. Joy exploded. Apologize, she shouted. To her, Sandra's demand proved everything: entitlement, arrogance, expectation. Joy ranted that Sandra had come onto her show, sat at her table, and expected polite applause while promoting a feel-good movie about redemption. That's when Whoopi finally stepped in, her voice firm and authoritative. She reminded Joy that it wasn't her show alone and that Sandra was a guest. She told Joy to dial it back immediately. But Joy was beyond restraint. Something had snapped. Years of resentment poured out as she accused everyone else of taking credit while she carried the show. She declared herself the only one brave enough to ask hard questions, the only one willing to call out hypocrisy. Sandra fired back, her own anger now fully visible. She demanded to know exactly what she was being accused of. No more vague insinuations. No more shadowboxing. Asterisk Joy abruptly stood up, her chair rolling backward as the audience gasped. She said she was done being subtle. She was tired of watching people get praised for doing the bare minimum while truth-tellers like her were vilified. She railed against Hollywood's fake niceness. Its manufactured sweetness masking the same ruthless industry it had always been. Asterisk Sarah N. finally broke the silence. Her voice barely a whisper, pleading with Joy to sit down. Asterisk, but by then, the damage was already done. Asterisk Joy shook her head and pointed directly at Sandra, her voice hard and unyielding. She said she was done pretending, done smiling, and playing along, while people who didn't deserve it were lifted up and treated like saints. If Sandra wanted to talk about her movie, Joy sneered. Then let's talk about how many other actresses were probably trampled along the way to get that role. Let's talk about a system that rewards the right face, the right image, and the right words while pretending it's all about virtue. That was it. Sandra rose from her chair, her patience finally spent. She said she didn't know what Joy's real problem was, but she refused to sit there and allow her character to be torn apart because of someone else's unresolved anger. What was happening, Sandra said plainly, was unprofessional and embarrassing for everyone involved. Asterisk Joy laughed bitterly. Embarrassing? She repeated, dripping with sarcasm. Coming from someone who built an entire career on playing the girl next door, while allegedly being something very different behind closed doors. Asterisk, the accusation landed like a grenade. Asterisk, the table froze. The audience gasped. Even Joy seemed to realize she had crossed a line that could never be erased. But instead of retreating, she doubled down. Her face flushed red, her voice trembling not just with anger, but something closer to desperation. Asterisk, she said, the real problem was that people like Sandra floated through life, praised for their supposed goodness, while people like her were branded difficult simply for telling the truth. She declared she was done being cast as the villain, just because she refused to participate in what she called a fantasy. Sandra didn't raise her voice. No one asked you to be anything other than professional, she said steadily. But what you're doing right now isn't truth-telling. It's crueltized as honesty. The words hit Joy like a physical blow. Her face twisted with rage. For a brief, terrifying moment, it looked like she might actually lunge across the table. Security shifted at the edges of the studio, uncertain whether to step in. Asterisk Joy repeated the phrase, her voice shaking with fury. Cruelty, she said. Cruelty was watching people succeed, not because of talent, but because they knew how to play the game. Cruelty was watching fake humility rewarded while authentic voices were punished. Asterisk Sandra shook her head in disbelief. Asterisk. She told Joy she didn't even know her that she was attacking a stranger based on assumptions, projecting her anger onto someone who had done nothing to earn it. That wasn't authenticity, Sandra said quietly. It was just sad. The word shattered something inside Joy. Her face went pale, then flushed crimson. Her hands trembled as she repeated its ad. She reminded everyone how long she'd been in the business, how she'd earned her place through decades of work, not by playing a lovable character audiences could fall for. Asterisk Whoopi tried to step in again, insisting no one was questioning Joy's place. Asterisk Joy spun toward the table, shouting that everyone questioned it. Every review, every article, every social media post. She was always too harsh, too difficult, too much. And maybe, she said, she was too much for a sanitized version of television where everyone pretends everything is fine. Asterisk Sandra watched, her anger now mixed with genuine concern. Asterisk, she told Joy this wasn't about television or Hollywood anymore. It sounded like something far deeper, something personal. Asterisk Joy snapped back instantly. telling Sandra not to psychoanalyze her. She accused her of sitting in a perfect bubble, of having no idea what it meant to fight for every opportunity in a world that wanted women to stay quiet and smile. Asterisk, Sandra answered, softly but firmly. Asterisk, she said, she did know what that was like. Every woman in the industry did. But turning that frustration on other women wasn't fighting the system, it was reinforcing it. Asterisk for a fleeting second. Joy's anger wavered. Something like recognition flickered across her face. Then it vanished. Her jaw tightened. Her eyes hardened and she leaned forward, venom dripping from her voice. She accused Sandra of thinking she had all the answers simply because she'd managed to stay popular, relevant, and beloved. And then she said, "Let me tell you something about staying relevant in this business." Asterisk Joy declared that sometimes staying relevant meant being willing to play the villain. Sometimes it meant saying the things others were too afraid to say. Sandra didn't raise her voice. With devastating calm, she replied that sometimes it simply meant being needlessly cruel to people who didn't deserve it. Asterisk. That was the breaking point. Asterisk Joy's face twisted with raw fury. In one violent motion, she grabbed her microphone pack and ripped it free, yanking so hard the wire snapped. She announced she was done with the show. Done pretending to care about the opinions of people who wouldn't survive 5 minutes in the real world. And especially done being lectured by someone whose biggest dilemma was choosing which charity gala to attend. Asterisk. The studio exploded into chaos. Asterisk's producers shouted from offstage, desperately debating whether to cut to commercial. Audience members gasped and murmured in disbelief. The remaining host sat frozen as Joy continued, her voice echoing through the studio. She said she quit. She was done being the lightning rod for controversy while everyone else played it safe. Done being painted as the villain just because she was willing to ask questions no one else dared to ask. Asterisk, one of the hosts, finally found her voice, pleading with Joy to sit down, to breathe, to let them fix this. She told her she was having a moment, that it didn't have to end this way. Joy laughed bitterly. This wasn't a moment, she said. This was decades of frustration finally spilling out. Years of watching an industry reward mediocrity while punishing honesty. And she refused to pretend anymore that it was acceptable. Asterisk Sandra stood slowly, her composure intact despite the storm around her. Asterisk, she said, she genuinely hoped Joy found the help she needed. But what had just happened, she made clear, wasn't honesty. It was an unprovoked attack on someone who came in good faith. That wasn't bravery. It wasn't authenticity. It was simply wrong. For a long moment, Joy stared at her, chest heaving. Something flickered across her face, perhaps regret. Perhaps shame, but it vanished almost instantly, replaced by defiant anger. She told Sandra to keep her sympathy. Some things, she snapped, couldn't be forgiven. Some people didn't deserve second chances. Asterisk, and with that, she turned and stormed off the set. Asterisk, she left behind her notes. Her coffee mugged more than 2 decades of television history. The cameras kept rolling. The remaining hosts sat in stunned silence. The audience didn't know whether to applaud or stay quiet. Sandra slowly returned to her seat, visibly shaken but composed. She quietly apologized to Whoopi, saying what had just unfolded clearly had nothing to do with the conversation or the film, and everything to do with something far deeper. Asterisk, Whoopi nodded slowly, still processing. She apologized on behalf of the show, calling the incident completely unacceptable and telling Sandra she had handled an impossible situation with remarkable grace. Asterisk, the studio remained eerily quiet as producers finally cut to commercial, bringing an end to one of the most explosive moments in daytime television history. Asterisk Joy Behar had walked away from the view in the most dramatic fashion imaginable, leaving behind a legacy forever marked by a final, unforgivable outburst. Asterisk. So, what do you think? Asterisk. Was Joy completely out of line? Was there a painful truth buried beneath all that anger? Asterisk. Subscribe for more shocking television moments and share your thoughts below on what really drove Joy to her breaking point.